Hey, Dr. Jacob. Hey, Joliet J. Nothing, I'm just chilling. What are you doing? Unlimited. Vive la France.
Now the magus is love, and bindeth together that and this in his conjuration. The formula of tetragrammaton is the complete mathematical expression of love. Its essence is this: any two things unite with a double effect. Firstly, the destruction of both, accompanied by the ecstasy due to the relief of the strain of separateness. Secondly, the creation of a third thing, accompanied by the ecstasy of the realization of existence, which is joy, until with development it becomes aware of its imperfection and loves. This formula of love is universal. All the laws of nature are its servitors. Thus gravitation, chemical affinity, electrical potential, and the rest, and these are alike mere aspects of the general law. So now the magus is love, and bindeth together that and this in his conjuration. The formula of tetragrammaton is the complete mathematical expression of love. Its essence is this: any two things unite with a double effect. Firstly, the destruction of both, accompanied by the ecstasy due to the relief of the strain of separateness. Secondly, the creation of a third thing, accompanied by the ecstasy of the realization of existence, which is joy, until with development it becomes aware of its imperfection and loves. This formula of love is universal. All the laws of nature are its servitors. Thus gravitation, chemical affinity, electrical potential, and the rest, and these are like mere aspects of the general law. So now the magus is love, and bindeth together, and woe, thrice woe, and four times woe be to him who is allured by the adventure, slacking his will, and demitted from his way. For is the laggard and the dastard and lost, so is the toy of circumstance dragged down to nethermost hell. Sir Knight, be vigilant, watch by your arms and renew your oath, for that day is of sinister augury, and deadly charged with danger which ye feel not, to overflowing with gay deeds, and bold of masterful, of manful chastity. Silence. of all the magical and mystical virtues, of all the graces of the soul, of all the attainments of the spirit, none has been so misunderstood, even when at all apprehended as silence. And woe, thrice woe, and four times woe be to him who is allured by the adventure, slacking his will, and demitted from his way. For as the laggard and the dastard are lost, so is the toy of circumstance dragged down to nethermost hell. Sir Knight, be vigilant, watch by your arms and renew your oath, for that day is of sinister augury, and deadly charged with danger which ye feel not, to overflowing with gay deeds, and bold of masterful, of manful chastity. Silence. Of all the magical and mystical virtues, of all the graces of the soul, of all the attainments of the spirit, none has been so misunderstood, even when at all apprehended as silence. And woe, thrice woe, and four times woe be to him who is allured by the adventure, slacking his will, and demitted from his way. For as the laggard and the dastard are lost, so is the toy of circumstance dragged down to nethermost hell. Sir Knight, be vigilant, watch by your arms and renew the chastity whose magical energy both protects and urges the aspirant to the sacred mysteries is quite contrary in its deepest nature to all vulgar ideas of it. For it is, in the first place, a positive passion, in the second connected only by obscure magical links with the sexual function, and in the third, the deadliest enemy of every form of bourgeois morality and sentiment. It may assist us to create in our minds a clear concept of this noblest and rarest, yet most necessary of the virtues, if we draw the distinction between it and one of its ingredients. It connotes the absence of all alien admixture from any given idea as
Jeff Jones are all the He's lonely like most of them. You don't know God.
understanding the nature of knowledge, the culmination and stasis of the intellectual faculties, has been discussed in the previous essay. It implies a contradiction in terms. Understanding is the resolution of this antinomy. It is the chief quality of neshama, the intelligence, an idea insusceptible of true definition because supra rational and only appreciable by direct experience. One can say at most that it is independent of any of the normal modes of motion of the mind. It is a significant illustration of the truth of this Kabbalistic theory that women often possess most excellent intelligence while totally incapable of the knowledge and reason on which logically it is founded. Samadhi, at first onset productive of bewildering ecstasy, ultimates in this understanding. One may understanding the nature of knowledge, the culmination and stasis of the intellectual faculties, has been discussed in the previous essay. It implies a contradiction in terms. Understanding is the resolution of this antinomy. It is the chief quality of neshama, the intelligence, an idea insusceptible of true definition because supra-rational and only appreciable by direct experience. One can say at most that it is independent of any of the normal modes of motion of the mind. It is a significant illustration of the truth of this Kabbalistic theory that women often possess.
But the fact that the tariffs are affecting everybody, now everybody's in the same boat, right? It's us against the world. We can't win, right? Trump is he is so convinced that we've got the nut, right? We've got the winning hand. And even, what's his name today said the same thing. The Secretary of the Treasury came out and said, China thinks they have the cards. They're holding deuces. They're not holding deuces. He's got a strong hand. We got nothing, We're just
They have a very strong hand.
So, Peter, I have a question for you. Given your history in the market, I've been myself in the market for about 30 years, and we've seen over time, going back to, say, long-term capital management as an example of how certain events can happen in the economy on a political level or whatever that can expose crowded trades in the market that are over-leveraged and cause a crisis. So right now, I think the one that's being exposed is the Treasury basis trade, which is over leveraged by some hedge funds between like 5 to 10%. And that trade is blowing up big time. Can you talk about that? I assume you know about that. And what's the volatility in the Treasury market?
Well, look, I think a lot of people are long and wrong in the bond market because they expected bonds to rise when the Fed cut rates. And this is another thing that I nailed. For almost a year before the Fed cut rates, I was saying that when the Fed finally cuts rates, that's going to be the top of the bond market. And long-term rates are going to start to rise as soon as the Fed starts to cut. Now, that was way against the consensus. And I was 100% right. When the first 75 basis points of cuts produced a 75 basis points rise in long-term yields. Everybody was surprised by that. That's exactly what I was forecasting would happen. And a lot of people are still waiting for the rate cuts to bring yields down. And in fact, Donald Trump, one of the things he said is like, we have sky-high interest rates. When he was we need to bring down these sky-high interest rates. They're not sky-high. Interest rates at 4%, 4.5%, they're low. And when you consider how much debt we have, they're super low. And so I think that bonds are a massive bubble. I think some of the biggest losses are going to be in the bond market, even more than the stock market, especially if you're leveraged long. So, I mean, it's almost like treasuries are the new subprime, right? Because that's what's going to happen. This is a sovereign debt crisis that we're going to have. And when you have a sovereign debt crisis, there's no bailouts because the government bailed out the mortgages by substituting its credit, right? The government did a TARP program. The U.S. government bought up all this toxic debt and issued treasuries. But when the treasuries are toxic, that's the end. There's nothing. There's no bailout, right? So, yeah, I mean, look, the financial system has never been in worse shape because we didn't swallow our medicine after 2008. We didn't clean up the mistakes that caused 2008. We tripled down on them. And, one of the, when they had these hearings in 2009, they wanted to have these hearings to try to figure out why we had the financial crisis. And I tried to get invited to those hearings because I knew why, because I predicted it. But they wouldn't invite me to speak or testify. Instead, every person who testified, not a single person who predicted it testified. In fact, all the people that were oblivious to it, who said it can never happen, they're the ones that showed up to explain why it happened. Now, of course, they don't know, because if they knew why it happened, they would have been with me warning about it. And of course, everybody that they invited to testify, they all had the same conclusion. It was, we didn't have enough regulation. We didn't have enough government, right? And so we just needed to give the government more power. We needed to give the Fed more power, when it was the government that caused it. But, so they just used the financial crisis as an excuse to further empower the institutions that caused the crisis. And so because we did that, we are so much more screwed up now than we were in 2007, 8 before the crisis, which is why this next crisis is going to be so bad, which is why, Trump shouldn't have poked the bear. I mean, it shows you the arrogance to not realize the fragility of the country. And I know Donald Trump knows that if we lose the dollar's reserve status, because one of the things he's been threatening to do, hey, if I see you moving away from the dollar, I'm going to hit you with tariffs. He said that nobody better move away from the dollar, or I'm going to tariff the hell out of you, right? So he knows that that's kind of our Achilles heel. Yet he still risks it. And that's the ultimate. I hear people say, well, would China sell our treasuries? Oh, they would never do something that stupid. Why would they sell our treasuries? Of course, duh. People say, well, China would really get hurt if they sold our treasuries because, it would make the bond market go down and they would take a hit on their treasuries. So why would they do that? No one ever says, well, what would happen to us if they sold the treasuries? It's way worse for us. In fact, if China sells its treasuries, it's good for China because they were going to lose a lot of money if they held them. So the sooner they can get rid of them, the better for China.
But Peter, isn't there?
I think a lot of people on Twitter focus on the stock market, but where you can see, the fragility you talk about is in the bond market. And it just seems like the average, Twitter or financial expert doesn't really understand how bad things are and how levered up funds are and how quickly this whole thing can really
everybody is clueless. They think the Fed is full of a bunch of geniuses when they're actually economic imbeciles. They created all the fires that people credit them for putting out, and they put them out with gasoline, so they're always going to come back worse. People think that they were able to solve the problems because they don't understand the problems that they actually made worse. And that's why, I'm never surprised by this bad stuff because, it's exactly what I say is going to happen. They're constantly surprised by all the things that they never thought were going to happen, which is why, when Powell said that, we're not going to have stagflation, he said, I can't see the stag and I can't see deflation. I was on my podcast saying, well, that's going to go down as subprime is contained and inflation is transitory. I said, there's so much stag, there's so much inflation. It's amazing to say that he doesn't see any evidence. There's evidence all over the place. He's got to be completely blind to that. So the guys that we think are so smart are clueless, absolutely clueless. The economic professors, the ones that rise to the top, they're a bunch of Keynesian fools. That's why they have their jobs. And the guys, the Wall Street economists, are mainly there to help Wall Street sell bonds and stocks to the public. So they put a ribbon on everything, and they're a bunch, they go from academia to the Wall Street firms to government. They all, because you don't get a government job unless you're Keynesian, and Wall Street wants to hire the guys that used to work for government, and it's all like this little circle of morons. And they're all surrounded by themselves, and it's like an echo chamber, and they all reinforce their moronic economic views. And so this is just going to be a disaster, But anyway, I'm not going to go anywhere because we got, a lot of people on the spaces. So I'm willing to keep talking. But I got to take a couple-minute break because I ran out of water. And I have, I'm on antibiotics now, so hopefully that gets, I've had this thing, and it's been in my throat. But I got to get more water, and I got to pee because I drank so much water. Now I got to go to the bathroom. So I got to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to leave my phone right here, and I'm going to come back. So if everybody sticks around, I'm going to come back. And again, what I'm going to do is I have a bunch of people that are that can speak, but what you guys should do is just once you've got a mic, just raise your hand, put the little orange wavy thing up, and then I'll just call on you. So and then as somebody speaks, I'll let you drop, and I'll make somebody else a speaker. All right, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Hence also any aspiration of impartial order, any which depends for its wisdom on the justice of our perceptions of our own needs, is almost certain to be tainted with the very poison of which nature would purge us. There is in fact only one magical operation of whose propriety we may say we may always be sure, and that is the increase of our sum of energy. It is even indiscreet to